This video is brought to you by Squarespace. There are some Naruto characters that have certain abilities that make them absolutely insanely broken and people don't really realize. And that's mostly because they are not terribly relevant characters and they don't appear all that much in the story, don't have that many fights, but when you think about what they could actually do, things get a little bit too insane. So today I am going to be talking about characters that are immune to physical abilities. And no, I'm not talking about Six Paths characters that can negate ninjutsu. I'm talking about characters that can negate ninjutsu and taijutsu. With a few exceptions, which we're going to get into, but still. Being untouchable for most physical powers in the Naruto-verse is an extremely broken ability. We're going to talk about 3 specific characters that have the ability to become immune to anything physical, essentially, through different types of abilities. But bear in mind that this is not about characters with extremely high durability, so like Kakazu's stone skin or the third Raikage's lightning armor are not going to count here because they are not immune to the attacks, they simply defend and essentially resist the attacks very well. So let's start off by the first character that's immune against physical abilities, which is going to be the most obvious one and the one everybody is thinking about, Obito Uchiha, the guy that can phase through anything using Kamui with his Mangekyou Sharingan, an extremely broken ability that's probably the strongest ability in the universe if you think about it, or at least very much high up there. Obito Uchiha is not exactly the most versatile fighter when it comes to variety of jutsus. He has Kamui, and that's pretty much it. He only uses Kamui for much of his ninja career, the phasing to defend himself, and the sucking into the Kamui dimension to end the fights, and that's it. That's what Obito does. It's pretty much a one-trick pony, but it works very well every time. Almost every time. There's a reason why the guy is so powerful even though he has one jutsu in his arsenal. It's because phasing through things is extremely OP. And most people agree with that statement. Obito's reaction time is also amazing, so he can react to things very well and phase through in time to avoid almost any attacks, and Kakashi has to come up with some very strategic analysis to counter Obito's Kamui in the war arc. And it's not because Obito can't react to it, it's because Kakashi is using Kamui against Kamui. Now, of course, Kamui is not invincible, it does have its weaknesses. First, Obito cannot touch anyone while he's phasing, which is a good thing because if he could, then he would be completely unstoppable. It's a very good and natural limitation for the jutsu, making him unable to attack while he's phasing through things. It makes sense, like yeah, sure, he is unable to reach things because he is intangible while he is phasing through stuff. And it's kind of an unconscious ability that Obito has. When he activates Kamui, whatever passes through him is passing through him. He cannot help himself. If he tries to reach towards you while he's phasing through your attack, his hand is just gonna phase through you as well, even though his entire body is not necessarily phasing. He only sends partial body parts to the Kamui dimension, but it doesn't matter. It's automatic. So that's one limitation. The other limitation is the 5-minute limit to it, which is a pretty decent limit. I mean, Konan could try some exploits to go after Obito using the time limit while her ocean of paper bombs exploded for 10 minutes, which forced Obito to use Izanagi and didn't work in the end, but it's okay. Still, 5 minutes is not that big of a limitation because Obito most likely will be able to find an opening to refresh his Kamui and restart the 5-minute countdown. But it's good that he has a limitation, and obviously chakra is also a limitation. He doesn't have infinite chakra, even though it kind of seems like he does in a couple of situations, like he's never out of chakra, essentially. He's always spamming, phasing Kamui. And the other big limitation is that obviously when he has to punch you and attack you, touching you physically, he cannot phase through things. That's how Minato manages to exploit Kamui into his favor by outspeeding and outreacting Obito with a flying thunder god, landing a Rasengan on him. Another weakness, and this one is much more specific, but you can attack Obito from within the Kamui dimension, which requires you to have access to Kamui as well, so only Kakashi can do that, but it's a limitation as well. But even with those limitations, which are fair, and makes the character more believable and honest when he has to fight against our protagonists, phasing through things with Kamui is an extremely OP ability. So let's move on to the next character that's kind of immune to physical attacks, which is gonna be Konan. She has the ability to turn her entire body into pieces of paper, meaning that whenever she's about to get hit by something, a punch, a jutsu, whatever, she can turn into paper and essentially negate the power of that attack. Now, obviously, we don't have as many showings of strength and feats from Konan in the entire series as we do from Obito, and the few times she appeared, she had some very bad matches against her, but still, it's an impressive ability. She can turn her entire body into separate pieces of paper and hover through the air. Now, can you destroy those pieces of paper outright? Like, if you use a fireball jutsu, would you be able to burn Konan away forever? I don't think so. If someone powerful like Sakura or Tsunade were to punch Konan in the head, I think her head would simply explode into a billion pieces of paper and she could coalesce them back into her body. Of course, the two fights she has, well, they're not a very good indicator as to Konan's capabilities because, as I said before, not very good matches. The first one is against Jiraiya, and it's very quick because Jiraiya knows Konan's weakness. He spits some oil on her, which makes the paper heavy and she cannot move very well or even use the paper jutsu to her advantage. And then the fight against Obito, she first has a very brief altercation where she tries to explode Obito with herself. Obito absorbs most of the explosion with Kamui. She also gets a little bit damage as well, but definitely not as much as Obito did. So maybe fire, and probably fire is a fair assumption that fire's pretty bad against paper here, so it's one of those weaknesses that can be exploited. Even though Konan can essentially turn herself into paper to avoid physical attacks, if you imbue those attacks with fire style, then yeah, it should probably work out to your advantage. And then Konan dies after Obito uses Izanagi and comes from behind, but that's because she was completely out of chakra in that point of the fight, or almost completely out of chakra and unable to turn herself into paper. That's why Obito could simply pierce her with that rod. She didn't have access to her paper immunity to physical attacks anymore because, yeah, this is a limitation almost every shinobi is gonna run into. If you don't have enough chakra to perform an ability, then yeah, even if you have an extremely powerful jutsu, is not gonna help you, is it? But even still, Konan's really powerful. It's unfortunate that she never got a fight where she could shine a little bit brighter. And the weaknesses of her immunity jutsu, they seem fair as well. I mean, if you think about paper, oil, yeah, oil should make paper heavier and cumbersome to deal with. Fire, pretty obvious, it's gonna burn paper away. And running out of chakra, like in the fight against Obito, pretty obvious as well. Every ninja has that problem. Or almost every ninja, and some characters are different. Before we continue, I'd like to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace, which is the best tool out there for you to create your own website. Squarespace makes the process of making your website much easier than you expect. You don't have to hire someone that knows code, you don't have to do anything like that, you just have to log in their website, and their tool allows you to create websites with professional quality. And the tools that are available to you are easy to use and very intuitive. They have several templates for you to choose from. You can customize your website exactly how you want. It doesn't matter what you want the website for. You can be a blogger, you can be an artist wanting to spread your art around the world, sell your things on the website, they can do all that stuff. So go to Squarespace right now and you can get a free trial for a month, and then when you're ready to launch your website, head to squarespace.com/Diagonite to get 10% off. Now let's get back to the video. And then we have another character that's immune to physical attacks, and this one is more impressive than Konan, even though his jutsu is pretty similar to hers. He turns his body into something and essentially negates physical attacks. That will be Suigetsu. We have many more feats from Suigetsu than we have from Konan, which is interesting. He can turn his body into water, essentially just like a lot of water, and negate physical attacks. Isn't that really nice? I mean, for example, in the war arc, when Karin sees Suigetsu again for the first time and she's mad at Sasuke that she goes to punch Suigetsu, Suigetsu's head explodes, but it explodes into a splash of water, and he seems completely undisturbed by Karin's punch. I mean, he is a little upset because it's like, why are you punching me if you're mad at Sasuke? But he's not like, oh, it hurts me, whatever. No, he is fine. The same thing applies when Killer Bee punched Suigetsu in the gut, and he could essentially swallow Bee's hand with his water body so that Sasuke could land a Chidori on Bee. That's pretty crazy. crazy. So he can mostly just shrug off attacks and say, well, if you hit my body, it doesn't really matter. It's gonna splash into water, and I can just coalesce the water back into the shape of my body, being completely fine. Of course, there are also weaknesses to Suigetsu's jutsu, otherwise it would have been extremely broken and nonsensical. The first glaring weakness, which is essentially Suigetsu's kryptonite, is lightning style. We see time and time again he doesn't deal well with lightning. First, in the fight against B, when he gets hit by Sasuke's Chidori indirectly and it still affects him a lot, and then when he's fighting against Darui in the 5 Kage Summit, Darui manages to imprison Suigetsu with his lightning-laced sword. And because the sword was laced with lightning, he couldn't properly use his water transformation jutsu to shrug off the attack, so he was just like nailed to the wall with a lightning sword. The second weakness is definitely, well, chakra, because he has to use his chakra in order to transform himself into the water shape. He acknowledges that when he is having a, well, not a friendly match against Kisame, but a bit of a duel against him while Itachi and Sasuke are fighting. He turns his body into water a couple of times, and he is like annoyed that Kisame drained his chakra because he thinks, well, I didn't do that much. Like, I turned my body into water a couple of times. I shouldn't have spent that much chakra, but this guy, oh yeah, that's right, he drained my chakra because he has the Samehada. So turning himself into water does spend chakra, even though he says it's not that big of a deal and not a lot of chakra. And this ability is implied to be a passive ability, because whenever Suigetsu gets hit by anyone, it doesn't matter if he's caught off guard or anything, he always explodes into water as though he is always using that ability. So yeah, it's probably passive, and it only costs chakra to do it when you're doing it. You don't have to keep it active, which is very powerful. It's the Hozuki clan signature ability, and the same ability the second Mizukage Gengetsu and Suigetsu's brother Mangekyou also had. Well, because they were from the same clan, but Suigetsu is the most famous character, so I'm mentioning him here, but there you go. Those characters also had this insanely overpowered ability to shrug off physical attacks. I mean, and Gengetsu is actually a very big deal in the verse. Like, he's extremely underrated. The guy is powerful. But the most insane feat we see from this ability is the fact that Suigetsu tanked a fully charged, complete A-Tails Tail Beast bomb at point blank range and survived because of this ability. Now, he was messed up after he took the Tail Beast bomb to his face, but he survived, which is a pretty impressive deal. Like, it's not a lot of people that would be able to tank a Tail Beast bomb like that in the verse. And yeah, you see him in a very precarious state after that. Sasuke and Jugo, they have to carry him, and he's almost like jello. It's very funny. But the guy took an attack that was way larger than the mountain range they were fighting against B in. That probably cost Suigetsu's entire chakra reserve to survive, but it's a fair trade, am I right? You survive one of the most potent attacks in the Naruto universe with an extremely powerful ability that you have access to. And yes, Obito is still more powerful than him or Konan, because he doesn't have to care about how powerful the attack his phasing through is going to be, but Suigetsu and Konan deserve some love as well, and these abilities they have access to are actually really cool to look at. Tell me in the comments below if there's another character that I forgot that has an ability similar to this one. Subscribe if you haven't already, like this video as well to help me with the YouTube algorithm, and thank you so much for watching, guys.